All right, but let's get her to get into this whole that's the last video of the night. Let's get into this Venezuela situation. And shout out to what was his name? Cappy Army. Let's go. Found this guy on Tucker Carlson. Knows his stuff.
The Monroe Doctrine looks like it's still alive and well as the U.S. military deployed a fleet of The Monroe Doctrine looks like it's still alive and well as the U.S. military deployed a fleet of warships and Marines surrounding the coast of Venezuela. The Pentagon's official messaging is that it's a mission to combat the drug cartels, but Venezuela's President Maduro says it's actually just a pretense for the U.S. to pull off a regime change against him. We'll see how this is actually just the most recent spat in a decades-long string of escalations between these two nations. These two have gone from being best bros to being on this collision course in a relatively short period of time. The buildup of American firepower in the Caribbean is the largest in over a generation, with at least a nuclear attack submarine, 3 guided missile destroyers, and multiple landing ships carrying over 4,500 sailors and Marines. And if you've ever seen how boring it gets out at sea on a Mew, these guys are begging the cartel to do something. And do something they did, because the strike group fired their first shots at the Venezuelan cartel, blowing up a smuggling boat, killing 11 alleged Tren de Aragua cartel members in a gigantic fireball. Instead of capturing and questioning these guys like they would have with the Coast Guard's help normally in the past, the military's now shooting first and asking questions never. Venezuela's armed forces responded by deploying their own warships armed with Chinese anti-ship missiles and long-range Iranian-designed drones off the coast. Maduro scrambled 2 of his F-16 fighter jets that he'd ordered to buzz American destroyers at low altitude. How did he get those? What's really happening here is Venezuela and the U.S. are acting out a much older geopolitical drama that has its roots in the Monroe Doctrine over 200 years ago. And the story of how these two nations went from being best friends to worst adversaries helps explain what we're going to see next. Is this a ramp up to a U.S. invasion, an attempt at regime change, or saber rattling? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let's find out. Today's episode is sponsored by Ground News. We'll use their website to analyze this story about if the United States will strike Mexican cartels on their territory. World, give Ground News a shot. To understand why these U.S. warships are parked off Venezuela's coast, we have to start with its geopolitical importance. So Venezuela sits at one of the most strategic pieces of real estate in the Western Hemisphere, right near the vital shipping lanes to the Panama Canal. And beneath it all, they have the world's largest proven oil reserves, although it's heavy oil that's harder to refine. Venezuela is only about 1,000 miles away from Florida. Its close proximity and socialist ways are why it's being called the new Cuba of the Second Cold War. And as with all sequels, it's much bigger, with a population of 30 million people and a gigantic 350,000 square miles of territory. Its topography is made of dense jungles and mountains, which would make an invasion a real pain.
Venezuela, that was some mean bush.
They have over 500,000 combined active duty and reservists, a modern arsenal of Russian main battle tanks, fighter jets, and Iranian kamikaze drones within striking distance of America. But the irony is that not so long ago, the same geography made Venezuela America's strongest ally in all of Latin America. So what went so very wrong? The dictator Juan Gomez seizes power in 1908 and decides to open the doors wide up to U.S. oil companies. America has the industrial know-how to develop his nation's untapped oil fields. Within just a generation, the U.S.-Venezuela partnership transforms the nation into the largest petroleum exporter in Latin America. It's a win-win. With their 50-50 split of profits, that makes the country flush with guap. They've got cold, hard cash, and it's just in time for World War II. Venezuela fuels the Allied war machine. They provide 50% of all U.S. oil imports, becoming their single largest oil supplier. This is a huge strategic win for America because it only takes 3 days to ship oil from Venezuela compared to the 30 days that it takes to get oil in from the Middle East. The U.S. sends dozens of Sherman tanks and fighter aircraft as a sign of affection. But
I sent you 2 screenshots in the Discord if you'd like to put those up for the idiots in chat that think Elon Musk came here with anything.
Gotcha. Let's see here. Boom. Let's see, we got the first one.
Simple Googling. Like Simple Googling is all it took.
I mean, to reference that man Sam Cedar, Google it. Well, as here, no, Elon Musk did not inherit a large sum of money and has stated he was not wealthy when he came to the U.S. While his father's family was affluent and owned businesses, including an emerald mine, Elon Musk's own early financial success began with his entrepreneurial ventures, such as Zip2, which he co-founded with funds borrowed from his father, which I looked it up. It was about like $23,000.
$23,000. He sold it for $300 million.
Yep. And
So
let's
fuck
see.
off.
Musk has described struggling financially in his early years in the United States, living modestly and often sleeping on couches. Family background. Yes, his family was wealthy, with his father having a background in business and an emerald mining business. I mean,
Yeah.
You want to get your emeralds, hit up Elon's dad. But no,
Yeah. And by the time that Elon actually immigrated to Canada, before he came to the US, his dad had went out of business and lost pretty much everything he had. So you guys that sit back, because it's just envy, and I know it's just envy. You guys hate someone because you ain't them. You don't know what you're talking about, and you just continue to spout things off, and you're ignorant. So have fun being ignorant.
You stupid.
The military bromance between the two nations is just beginning to blossom, because in 1947, the two countries joined what's called the Rio Pact. It commits them to helping each other defend the Western Hemisphere against
And now,
any outside attack.
hold on. Now we're talking about what he stole from his partners. I'm assuming you're talking about the long legend of what he stole from Tesla. If you go back and read financial documents from when Tesla was founded, when Elon Musk invested in Tesla, Tesla had zero intellectual property. When the co-founders of Tesla left Tesla, they still had zero intellectual property. So, meaning there was no thought, there was nothing that was stolen. They had an idea for an electric car, and Elon Musk founded every aspect of it, or financed every aspect of it, and then they left because they disagreed with the direction to take Tesla. And the person that won that battle is the person that took Tesla in the direction that it's in today. So you can shut the hell up unless you know a damn thing about anything.
Communism. The Rio Pact is a lot like NATO, but for the Americas instead of Europe. It even has an Article 3 clause that states an attack on one is attack on all. At its height, everybody who's anybody in the Western Hemisphere is part of the Rio Pact. It's now the 1950s, and Venezuela tosses aside its form of dictatorship and authoritarian rule. They become a stable democracy with elections and all that good stuff. This puts them in even closer alignment with the United States government. In fact, Venezuela's friendship allows it to avoid all those brutal coups and military interventions that the U.S. conducts throughout Latin America in the Cold War. And this is only the beginning. These two nations' relations are on fire in the best way. Because in 1973, the Arab oil countries withhold oil from the United States. Venezuela steps in and helps out to reliably supply oil to America throughout that embargo. And things could not possibly get any better. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Then in 1976, things start to shift. Venezuela nationalizes the oil industry, which ends direct U.S. corporate control of its oil fields. So overnight, Exxon's forced to hand over control to the new Venezuelan state-owned oil company. Now the relationship has started to shift, because the United States is simply buying the oil from Venezuela instead of owning it, which means future Venezuelan leaders could use oil as a political weapon against Washington. But that was a problem to worry about in the future. All relations have their ups and downs, and for now, relations are reaching an all-time high. It's the 1980s, and Venezuela just signed the Peace Delta program. It allows them to receive 24 of the advanced American F-16 fighter jets. So that's where they got them. They're actually the only Latin American country to be granted this powerful capability directly. American armored vehicles, European fighter jets, and a whole fleet of modern naval frigates start flowing in. Venezuela was looking like a full-on petro-state democracy. But underneath the boom, the resource curse is about to show its ugly head. The resource curse is the fact that Venezuela is 95% dependent on oil for revenue. This is a major risk. It's a huge liability because in the mid-1980s, the price of oil collapses from $30 a barrel to under $10 a barrel. This wipes out government revenue overnight, and Venezuela's turn to the Western-led institution, the IMF, for help. The IMF is sort of like a payday loan company, but for countries. The $4.5 billion bailout comes with strict strings attached. This money comes with austerity measures, which means they have to cut back drastically on government spending. So if you're a citizen living in Venezuela, all you see is overnight the cost to fill up your gas tank rises by 100%. Many people lose their jobs, and social programs that people rely on are eliminated. This shock triggers days of riots by the people. The government, in response, deploys the army domestically to restore order. It's a horrible, chaotic scene. The Venezuelan soldiers open fire on crowds of people, and for 3 days, the capital of Caracas looks like a war zone. The brutal crackdown is called the Caracaso Massacre. It's seared into the public consciousness in Venezuela to this day. The effects were devastating. It was similar to like the Great Depression. Among the young officers, though, ordered to deploy during this crackdown against their own people was a paratrooper named Hugo Chavez. He later says he never forgot what he saw, the government turning their rifles on their own citizens. 3 years later, he tries to overthrow the government with a coup. It fails. He's sent to prison. Chavez is later pardoned. And in 1998, he wins the presidency on a promise that he's going to return the nation's oil wealth to the people. Chavez institutes a form of socialism under his slogan of motherland, socialism, or death. Right during this time, a drug trafficking organization called Cartel of the Suns takes form as a network inside Venezuela's military and political elite, starting as low-ranking officers skimming profits off drug shipments that are passing into the United States. But this is where the U.S. relations with Venezuela take a serious turn for the worse. Chavez was openly hostile to the United States from the get-go because from his perspective, Washington had spent decades exploiting Venezuela's oil and toppling left-leaning governments across Latin America. Hugo Chavez says, quote, "The government brought soldiers from the interior like an invading army, as if they were the armed forces of the IMF, but the two nations are still forced to play nice with one another. The U.S. government is still reliant on Venezuela for about 1/6 of their oil imports, and Chavez continues selling oil to the United States because he needs that income." But on April 11, 2002, opposition groups stage a massive march in Caracas. Violence erupts, gunfire breaks out, dozens of people are killed with hundreds injured, and top military commanders who have been planning for this for months seize on the chaos, demanding Chavez's resignation. Chavez is arrested by the military, and moments later, the U.S. government, under the Bush administration, quickly recognizes his replacement. But within 48 hours, Chavez is returned to power by loyalists and a public outcry supporting him. The Bush administration claims they had no credible information on the coup plot. However, years later, it's revealed the CIA had actually known weeks in advance. This CIA document here was later declassified, showing intel that they gathered that a coup was about to happen. Whether the CIA was directly involved or just turned a blind eye, either way, Chavez blames the United States for the coup against him. In 2005, the U.S. imposes a full arms embargo on Venezuela, making it impossible for Chavez to get the vital replacement parts that he needs to run his F-16 fighter jets. He turns to buying military equipment from Russia, including T-72 tanks, Su fighter jets, AK-103 rifles, and since 2008, Moscow has flown Tu-160 nuclear-capable long-range strategic bombers into Venezuela, staging them at their military air bases. Russian warships have docked in Venezuelan ports, and advisors from Russia have trained Venezuelan forces on S-300 air defense systems that they have. Russian soldiers with Wagner patches have been seen on social media helping stop protests there. China builds radar stations monitoring U.S. fighter aircrafts and naval traffic. Well, that all escalated quickly. Venezuela has become the most hostile nation towards the United States and Latin America, but it hasn't fully crossed the line yet between these two. It can still be turned around and salvaged. No one said anything yet that they couldn't take back. Fellas, I can still save her. A month later, Chavez starts using the profits from American-bought oil to subsidize Cuba, Nicaragua, and 12 other nations. The petrocarbide program turns oil into diplomacy. It buys him allies, which in turn buys him votes at the UN. These votes are then used as a block against U.S. projects. U.S. agencies like the National Endowment for Democracy start to fight back. They send millions of dollars in funding to Venezuelan opposition groups and media outlets in an attempt to weaken Chavez's power or outright overthrow him. Chavez makes a move that won't allow that to happen. He abolishes presidential term limits in 2009. The country officially slides back into authoritarian rule. Relations between these two are now worse than estranged. We're in the middle of a full-blown messy divorce. Son, it's not your fault. Your mother just wants to see other communists. Now, when Chavez dies in 2013, Nicolas Maduro inherits the state and the hate for America. But it's the worst possible time for Maduro because the shale oil boom inside the United States makes importing oil from Venezuela no longer necessary. The United States becomes a net exporter of oil within a matter of a few short years, and Maduro loses almost all his leverage over the United States almost immediately. Between 2014 and 2016, oil drops from $100 a barrel to $30. This means nearly all of the Venezuelan government's income vanishes. Hyperinflation sets in, and the economy is in free fall. Maduro claims victory in the 2018 election, but international observers and much of the Venezuelan public reject it as fraudulent. The problem is, Maduro doesn't have the je ne sais quoi of Chavez. He doesn't have the popular support and love that Chavez did. And to make up for this, Maduro jails major opposition candidates. They escape into exile as well. And in 2019, Washington indicts Maduro in U.S. courts as a narco drug trafficker and places a $10 million bounty on his head for his arrest. In response, Maduro leans even harder on America's enemies for support. He sells cheap oil to China, invites Iranian Quds Force operatives, which is like their version of the CIA, to establish the largest military drone production facility in all of Latin America on Venezuelan soil, pumping out armed Shahed-style attack drones, the same type that Russia's using against Ukraine. We are on a full-blown collision course now. Gentlemen, with the claims of widely believed fraudulent election in 2020, the U.S. takes even more drastic steps. President Trump institutes sanctions on Venezuela, cutting off what little oil purchases remain, and the economy there goes from bad to worse. The foreign policy goal switches to trying to force regime change by preventing Maduro from being capable of paying his forces. With millions of dollars in bounty money on the table, a group of mercenaries with two former U.S. Special Forces operators attempt to land on Venezuelan beaches to capture Maduro and overthrow his government. The plan to exploit what they believe will be thousands of soldiers who will join up against them doesn't pan out. The plan fails almost immediately. Several are killed, and Americans are captured and imprisoned.
Venezuelan authorities killed 8 of the men whom they described as mercenary terrorists.
With smuggling of drugs, gold, and selling cheap oil to China, it means that Maduro has enough to pay his forces for their loyalty, and this rekindles talk of the Monroe Doctrine, a 200-year-old principle that warns rival powers to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. It's originally supposed to be an agreement for the U.S.
And shout out to my man Hellbat. He says tinfoil hat time. Biden team was trying to get someone to attack the U.S. to start a war and enact martial law to continue destroying us. I mean, well, damn. Well, you know what? I mean, shoot, all possibilities, all possibilities. Well, shoot, financing the Ukraine war was kind of killing us, so at least we stopped that. So he kind of was already starting.
US and Europe to not mess in each other's backyards. But over time, it morphs into something much bigger. It becomes a foundational pillar of U.S. dominance in the hemisphere. The strategy believes the U.S. can not become a great power of the world if it's concerned about adversaries at home. So Washington uses the Monroe Doctrine to justify various bloody interventions like in Panama, coups and occupations across the hemisphere. But in Moscow and Beijing, they claim that the doctrine is really about pushing American imperialism. They claim it's hypocritical because at the same time, the United States stations troops on Russia's border and sells warships through China's coastal waters. America's response to that is they claim it's about defending sovereignty of smaller nations. As Venezuela's economy entirely collapses, 7 million Venezuelan citizens flee the country, many of them to the United States and neighboring countries, causing an immigration crisis across the Americas. Gangs like Tren de Aragua start showing up in U.S. cities, driving discussions about border security and immigration debates. What was once foreign policy has quickly become domestic politics inside the United States. And that's when in 2023, Maduro sees a possible way out of his predicament. He sees a way to claw back all his oil wealth and his position of power domestically. He claims the disputed region from his tiny neighbor Guyana. The recently discovered oil reserves found there can make the much smaller nation of Guyana the world's fastest growing oil producer. Maduro uses this threat of military action as a domestic rallying point. He claims it's to defend sacred Venezuelan territory. He uses this as new leverage to pressure American oil.
Even though there's like barely any Hispanics in Guyana, and it's mostly actually Guyana has a very weird demographic. It's like what it got black people, it got Indian people, it got a good amount of Asians. It's a very diverse population, but no Venezuelans or Hispanics live there. Rarely, even though they border the country.
Companies that want a piece of that sweet, that crude oil. Maduro uses the possible invasion as justification to buy more.
Oh, and the reason why I know about Guyana's population like that is because, well, my mom's from there. So yeah, native born.
Or military equipment from the Russians, Iranians, and Chinese. Venezuela deploys troops right to the border of Guyana and begins building new military infrastructure to create a credible threat of an invasion force. Guyana has only 4,000 troops, so they call for backup. The United Kingdom sends a warship to support them, and the U.S. under the Biden administration begins holding joint military drills in solidarity and doing flyovers with fighter jets. They state that they're supporting Guyana's sovereignty, and they increase the reward for Maduro's arrest of $15 million. Now that brings us to today and the most recent escalation. The U.S. government is once again applying maximum pressure campaign against Venezuela by first increasing that bounty to $50 million for Maduro's capture, and now with sanctions so far failing to create changes in the politics in Venezuela, the U.S. government is turning to an old strategy also from the 19th century like the Monroe Doctrine, gunboat diplomacy. They're attempting to use a naval force to pressure Maduro into compliance without outright declaring war. And that's why when you see 7 U.S. warships off Venezuela's coast today, it isn't just about drug cartels, likely. It fits a long pattern of power projection. Today, U.S. naval deployments surrounding Venezuela are too large to simply be to counter drug trafficking. You don't need guided missile destroyers and amphibious landing vehicles to do that. But the strike force is also too small for a full-blown invasion, which would require an aircraft carrier and many times more troops. Instead, the fleet of warships is exactly the right size to project power and put pressure on Maduro by forcing him to pay money, millions of dollars, to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people and equipment and troops, funds that, as we just learned, his nation does not have. It puts his forces into an alert status and forces him to react. He then went on to claim to have mobilized 4.5 million armed citizens and is threatening to call up a full republic in arms, which would be a tremendous sap on his resources. If this pressure were to be sustained, it could lead to a coup against him, or at the least a thorn in his side. This wouldn't be the first time this has been done. In 1964, the U.S. executed Operation Brother Sam by sending an aircraft carrier and destroyers to Brazil in coordination with a coup against their president, who was unfriendly to the United States. The Brazilian president fled, and the generals friendly to the U.S. seized power. U.S. officials weren't going to allow another Cuba to take root in South America then, and they likely aren't going to allow it today. In gunboat diplomacy, it isn't always about regime change. It can be for compliance, to negotiate a deal that involves oil sales to the United States instead of to China, or the removal of Russian and Iranian military infrastructure inside Venezuela. It's likely an attempt to get Latin American governments to take a stronger stance against drug cartels, which Maduro is already claiming to do with the deployment of 15,000 troops to the border with Colombia. Whatever the end goal is, the deployment follows a clear historical trend in the Americas. When the U.S. is unable to overthrow a government, like in Cuba, they instead turn to isolating that government economically, until they're no longer perceived as a strategic threat. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Show notes, sources, and exclusive.
Oh man, well, you can't beat them, starve them. Well, all right, now let's get. Oh, actually, let's get over to the Middle East and shout out to Myron's analysis on this so-called inevitable war. I was listening to it and it sounded pretty interesting. Pretty interesting take.
They're absolutely going to fight each other again. The news is coming out saying that Iran has a stockpile of uranium. I promise you guys that that's going to be used as a justification when Israel attacks Iran again. And another reason, too, why we know that they're going to attack them again is because the axis of resistance is still weak. They need to strike now and decapitate Iran while they have the ability to do so, because their last plan backfired. I don't know how they're going to do it because they expended all the resources. They use their drones, they use their Mossad agents, they use their fucking Air Force, they use the element of surprise. All of that, they don't have it on this go-round. So I don't know how they're going to mount their attack this time, but a war is inevitable at this point. And as you guys can see, from 2018 all the way to now, the writing's on the wall. Another war is imminent.
I want to take you out to an international story that we are following right now, as a confidential report by the United Nations nuclear watchdog circulated to member states and obtained by the Associated Press shows Iran increased its stockpile of uranium enriched to near weapons-grade levels before Israel launched its military attack back in June. The report by the International Atomic Energy Agency said that as of June 13th, Iran had about 972 pounds of uranium that was enriched up to 60%, up 71 pounds since the last report 1 month earlier. That material is a short technical step away from weapons-grade levels of 90%, and the IAEA says about 93 pounds of 60% enriched uranium is theoretically enough to produce one atomic bomb.
Theoretically is wild. Theoretically. And people already
Technically speaking.
Theoretically, like, all right, Monty, you cover that one up for me, because first it was 90%, and now it don't even matter. Like, if they got enough 60%, theoretically, they can create a bomb.
No. So if I'm understanding it correctly, if you have 93 pounds of 60%, you can enrich that 60% up. You'll have some losses, but you'll have enough once it's all the way enriched for one bomb, like as it condenses down. I'm definitely not a nuclear scientist.
I don't know. So let's hear him out one more time and let's see if we can kind of get it like a simpler understanding.
60% up. Israel launched its military attack back in June. The report by the International Atomic Energy Agency said that as of June 13th, Iran had about 972 pounds of uranium that was enriched up to 60%, up 71 pounds since the last report 1 month earlier. That material is a short technical step away from weapons-grade levels of 90%, and the IAEA says about 93 pounds of 60% enriched uranium is theoretically enough to produce one atomic bomb.
So it's not like it's not them like, okay, so they're not upgrading it to 90, it's just having enough of 60%.
No. You have enough of 60. You take that short technical step, and you need 93 pounds at 60%, and say you get 60 pounds at 90%. I'm using rough numbers because I don't know how it exactly works, but that's the impression that I'm getting. You have to do that technical step, but you only need 93 pounds at the 60% to refine it down.
I don't know. The conversion I was getting was like, all right, well, 90% uranium could be equal to, well, as you say, like 93 pounds of 60% uranium.
No. 90%. You like, it's not like 1 pound of uranium is equal to at 93% is equal to 93 pounds at 60%. No, it's not that.
Okay.
It's you refine it. You like, for example, if you have gold and you have pay dirt, right? And you have 100 million pounds of pay dirt, and you refine that pay dirt and get the gold out of it, you're not going to end up with 100 million pounds. But if you have it 60% processed, now it's 60,000 or 600,000 pounds or 60,000 pounds or whatever, and then you do the last step, and now you have enough for X amount of gold.
All right, well, let's see here.
Enriched to 90%. Again, you can see that information here from the Associated Press on your screen.
Now, the reason why this is important, guys, is because they're going to use this to justify going into war again, okay? So let's really start to break this thing down real quick. First,
bomb, Iran.
Going on between Israel and multiple Arab nations or Muslim nations. As you guys know, Israel always says, oh, we're on a battlefront on 7 different wars, blah, 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 right? So let's identify Israel's enemies, all right? First, you have Iran, right? And the IRGC. Then you have Iraq, Syria, Hezbollah, right? In Lebanon. And then you got Hamas down in the Gaza Strip, right? Multiple different fighters within the Gaza Strip. Hamas is the main one, though. And you got Iraqi security forces, and then obviously, you know, Syria, all this other shit, right? And then the Houthis down here, right? This is what basically is the axis of resistance. And these countries work together to stop Israel from expanding and attacking a lot of these Muslim countries. And this has been going on for a very long time. But just so you guys understand, for simple purposes, this is Israel versus their ops. Iran is the leader of the axis of resistance. They are the ones that fund and support many of these different proxies that attack Israel. Now, we're going to go back to the 2018-2019 Gaza border protests. And the reason why is because these protests kind of was the last straw. So it's also known as the Great March of Return. There are a series of demonstrations held each Friday in Gaza near the Gaza-Israel border from March 30th, 2018 until December 27, 2019, in which Israel killed a total of 223 Palestinians. The demonstrators demanded that the Palestinian refugees must be allowed to return to lands they were displaced from that is now Israel. They protest against Israel's land, air, and sea blockade of Gaza and the United States recognition of Jerusalem as capital of Israel. As you guys know, this is what Donald Trump did when he was in office. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital, moved the embassy, allowed the West Bank to continue expanding the illegal settlements. So these Palestinians peacefully protested on the border on the Gaza Strip. 223 of them were killed, sniped by Israeli snipers, to include children, by the way. This was pretty much the last straw because basically they tried doing peaceful protests, and what did they get in return? They got fucking sniped and killed. Israelis always want to tell you guys about October 7th, but they never ever tell you guys about what led up to October 7th. Now, obviously, this war has been going on. I started in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration. But for the purposes of today's discussion, to keep things nice and concise for you guys, I'm going back to 2018 because the failure of the march is what led to them utilizing a military strategy and force instead. Yahya Sinwar said this in many different of his speeches. I'll let you guys hear from him yourself. This is what the mainstream news will never show you guys, and they'll never tell you. And I do think it's important to understand why people do the things that they do. But here in America, for some odd fucking reason, we never put out everything. All right, so here is Yahya Sinwar, right? We just wanted to send a message to the Israelis. This is in 2021. Mind you guys, this is after the failure of this march. We will not allow them to have their way with Al-Aqsa Mosque, Jerusalem, or the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. As you guys know, they're looking to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They continue to violate international law and resolutions in Jerusalem and the West Bank.
التي تخالف القانون الدولي وتخالف القرارات الدولية في القدس وفي الضفة الغربية
by establishing settlements, stealing land, and continuing to blockade on Gaza.
باستيطان ومصادرة الأراضي وباستمرار الحصار ضد أهلنا وضدنا في قطاع غزة وباستمرار
and continuing policies
سياسات الفصل العنصري والتمييز
of apartheid and racial discrimination
العنصري ضد أهلنا في داخل
against Palestinians living in 1948 territory Israel.
الأراضي المحتلة عام 48. إحنا
Do you see this footage right here, guys? This is from the 2018 march.
فترات طويلة لجأنا إلى
For long periods of times, we've tried peaceful protests, and you guys can see here. This is also from the 2018 and 2019 marches. You guys can see.
أساليب المقاومة الشعبية السلمية والمقاومة الشعبية.
We've tried peaceful resistance. Unfortunately, we expected
وللأسف الشديد جدا كنا نعتقد بأنه العالم
that the international community, free people,
دول العالم والشعوب الحرة والمنظومات الدولية
and international organizations
تقف إلى جانب
would stop the occupation from committing crimes
شعبنا وتكبح الاحتلال
and massacring our people.
من أن يرتكب جرائم ومجازر ضد شعبنا. لكن للأسف الشديد
Unfortunately, the world stood by and watched as the occupation war machine.
جدا وقف العالم متفرجا.
Unfortunately, they killed our young people. There you go. This is them taking a body back from getting shot by the IDF.
آلة حرب جيش الاحتلال وهي تقتل أبنائنا أن نجعل الاحتلال أمام خيارنا.
Now, 1 year before the attack, he delivers this speech. He says we have two options.
إما أن نرغم
Either we make it implement international law,
بتطبيق القانون الدولي واحترام القرار.
respect international resolutions. As you guys can see here, this is Yasser Arafat along Yitzhak Rabin with President Clinton in 1993. This is the Oslo Accords, which Israel never respected the Oslo Accords because Benjamin Netanyahu came in and basically stonewalled them. And the Oslo Accords were supposed to become the beginning of potentially getting a two-state solution. So we either have them respect international law, or Either we and the world force it to do this and achieve the establishment of a Palestinian state on the lands occupied in 1967, including East Jerusalem. Or we will place this occupation in a state of contradiction and collision with the will of the international community and isolate them to an extreme and bring an end to a state of integration in the region and in the world, and usher a collapse that will occur on all fronts of the resistance in all fronts. Here's another interview he did. What are we supposed to do? Should we raise the white flag? That's not going to happen.
هل نرفع الراية البيضاء؟ نحن لن نرفع الراية البيضاء. هل المطلوب منا أمام
Does the world expects us to be well-behaved victims while we're being killed?
العالم أن نقتل وأن نكون الضحية الطيبة حسنة الأخلاق.
For us to be slaughtered without making a noise?
التي تقتل دون أن يرتفع لها صوت. هذا غير ممكن بالمطلق.
That's impossible.
نحن
We decided to defend our people with whatever weapons we have.
قررنا أن ندافع عن شعبنا بما أوتينا من قوة.
So that's just so you guys understand the background, because Western media, for some odd reason, never talks about this shit, which is strange to me. So you had the Gaza protests. They were a monumental failure. A lot of people died. That pretty much made them say, yo, we tried to peacefully protest, and these guys don't give a fuck, and they don't want to give us statehood. As we know, Benjamin Netanyahu has been sabotaging the Oslo Accords for fucking years. He's been caught on video doing this. Now, this led to clashes in 2018. Gaza-Israel clashes began on November 11th, 2018, when a botched Israeli covert operation carried out in Khan Yunis, area of southern Gaza Strip, killed 7 Palestinian militants and 1 Israeli soldier. So this was one of the escalations. Then, on March 25th, 2019, a rocket was launched from Gaza and hit a house in Mishmeret, injuring 7 people. The rocket was probably a domestically produced J-80 rocket and flew some 120 kilometers from Rafah in the south of Gaza to Mishmeret, along with incendiary balloons. Then that led to more fighting, right? May 19th, Gaza-Israel clashes. And you guys can see all the different fucking little things that happened between May 3rd to May 5th, right? And 4 civilians killed, 123 civilians wounded, 2 soldiers. Then that leads us to the assassination of Baha Abu al-Alta, right? He was the leader of the Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine. On November 12, 2019, the Israeli Defense Force, IDF, killed Abu Alta and his wife in a targeted killing. 4 of their children and neighbors were also injured. The killing triggered clashes between Israelis and Palestinians. Khalil Bathani became the new leader of the PIJ. Next, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani, guys, was killed by the U.S. on January 3rd, 2020. Donald Trump ordered a drone strike on him. And Qasem Soleimani, guys, was the head of the IRGC and the head of the Axis of Resistance, which I showed you guys earlier right here. He was responsible for arming the other proxies. He would support Hezbollah because they were right on Israel's northern border. And the weapons would go from Iran through Iraq, through Syria, destined for Lebanon, because Hezbollah is their most competent proxy military, right? They also would fund the Houthis down here in Yemen as well. Okay, down this way, you guys can see with my mouse. So losing Qasem Soleimani was huge because he basically ran the IRGC. Okay. And they killed him in Iraq, which questionable. They used a very nebulous international statute during the Saddam Hussein Iraqi war era to justify the killing. But this was a huge escalation in the conflict. And Qasem Soleimani, literally even Mossad, former Mossad director Yossi Cohen said Soleimani's strategies had personally tightened the noose around Israel's neck, right? So this was a big deal when they lost him. So then was the assassination of Mohsen Mahabadi, okay? He was an Iranian nuclear scientist, physicist and scientist. He was regarded as the chief of Iran's nuclear program. Okay, he was killed in 2020. So Qasem Soleimani gets killed in January. Roughly 11 months later, the head scientist of Iran's nuclear program gets killed by the Israelis. Israelis are notorious for assassinating nuclear scientists. Next, 2021. And what ended up happening was there was a crisis. And what happened here was it was a major outbreak of violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that mainly commenced on May 10th, 2021. It continued until a ceasefire came into effect on May 21st. So more skirmishes, more fighting, rockets going back, people being killed, etc. Then another clash in 2022. The 2022 Gaza-Israel clash code named Operation Breaking Dawn lasted from August 5th to the 7th of 2022. The Israeli Defense Forces conducted some 147 airstrikes in Gaza, and Palestinian militants fired approximately 1,100 rockets towards Israel. The operation, ordered by Prime Minister Yair Lapid and Defense Minister Benny Gantz, without prior cabinet discussion or approval, followed a raid in Jenin in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, in which Israeli forces arrested Bassam al-Saadi, a leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. On August 6, Israel arrested 20 people in the West Bank, of whom 19 were members of the PIJ, and a further 20 on August 7th, according to an unnamed Israeli official. Now we're going to fast forward to the October 7th attacks. As you guys can see, several skirmishes and conflicts occurred before. Quick little recap. We have the 2018 to 2019 Gaza protests, where Palestinians were being killed while trying to peacefully protest. We got the attacks from November 2018. Then we got the attacks in 2019. Then we have the Israel clashes in May of 2019. Then we got the assassination of Bahu Abu al-Alta, right, who was a leader in the Palestinian movement. Then you got the assassination of Qassam Soleimani. Then you got the assassination in Iraq. Then you have the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, head nuclear scientist. Sorry, I'm butchering his name. He's not, it's Farsi, guys. Then in 2021, more skirmishes. 2022, more skirmishes. Okay? This all leads to the October 7th attacks, aka Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. You guys know what happened on October 7th. I've talked about it a million times. 1,200 Israelis killed. 400 of them were IDF. That leaves us with about 800. Of that 800 that's left, 200 were killed by the IDF based on the Hannibal Directive, which was 100% implemented on that day. So you guys proved this a million times. So that leaves us with roughly 600 people. Of those 600, to this day, we don't know who Hamas killed versus who the IDF killed. But what you guys do need to know is that when they run these operations, Hamas, etc., the goal is to kidnap as many Israelis as possible. I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm telling you guys what the goal is. The goal is to take these individuals to facilitate prisoner exchanges. And the reason why they want to do these prisoner exchanges is because right now, as we speak, guys, roughly 11,000 Palestinians are in Israeli jails. About 3,500 of those people in these Israeli jails are being held without charge, without due process, being abused, being raped, and not being treated like humans. And they're being tortured. This has been documented widely by so many different humanitarian organizations. Hell, even Israelis are coming forward documenting this stuff. So the October 7th attacks occurred because of all the stuff I showed you, on top of the Abraham Accords, the impending destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's why they called it Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Notice how in American media, they never talk about what the operation is called. Did you guys catch on to that? They only called the October 7th attacks in the West. They never call it Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, because for you to name the operation gives a religious context, and they don't want them to have that. But at the same time, the Israelis use religious context all the time. Hell, it's one of their main claims as to why Israel is their land. So we already know what happened on October 7th. Then this leads us to the Gaza war, right? As you guys know, and the war is still going on. There's been carpet bombing all across the Gaza Strip. Innocent children like Hind Rajab are getting killed all over the place. Tens of thousands of children have died. Now, another escalation. On April 1st, 2024, Israel conducted an airstrike on the Iranian embassy complex in Damascus, Syria, destroying the building housing its consular section. The airstrike began the 2024 Iran-Israel conflict and took place during a period of heightened tension between Israel and Iran, and amidst the Gaza war and the Israel-Hezbollah attack or conflict. So on October 8th, after October 7th happened, Hezbollah started shooting rockets into northern Israel. The reason why they did this is because they wanted the IDF to not be able to, here, let me show you guys on a map. The reason why they did this, chat, is because, and as you guys can see here, here's southern Lebanon right here, and here's northern Israel. The reason why they were shooting rockets into northern Israel, Haifa area, etc., and that's to evacuate 60,000 people, is because it would force the IDF to move resources from the Gaza Strip down here on the south up north. Okay, and that would weaken and split their fighting force. So it was a diversion tactic. And the Houthis also got involved after October 7th happened, and were shooting rockets down here from Yemen. Okay, so this was all done strategically to limit, right, or weaken the ground invasion that was taking place in Gaza. So after the Israelis bombed this embassy in Syria, the Iranians retaliated. So they destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, and they killed a bunch of people from the IRGC. The IRGC, guys, is basically the military of Iran. So obviously, bombing an embassy is an act of war. It's a huge escalation. So the Israelis bombed the embassy in Syria, another country, by the way, and killed several IRGC guys. So Iran retaliated, and this is the first time that they actually shot missiles into Israel. On April 13th, 2024, 2024, the Islamic IRGC, a branch of the Iranian forces in collaboration with the Islamic resistance in Iraq, Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, and the Ansar Allah Houthis, launched attacks against Israel and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is right here, guys. Okay. Israel's controlled this area since 1967, but it is technically Syria. It's occupied by Israel, though. So they responded, right? And they hit them back. So what happened was a branch, they shot missiles with loitering munitions, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. The attack was codenamed by Iran as Operation True Promise. Iran said it was in retaliation for the Israeli bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus on April 1st. So roughly almost 2 weeks later, 12 days later, they attacked Israel. And this was the first time that the Iranians actually shot missiles at Israel. Israel retaliated on April 19th and launched a series of retaliatory missiles strikes on Iranian military sites, including one near Isfahan. Now, this is the beginning of where you're going to start to see, guys, Israel start to target Iran's nuclear facilities. So keep this in mind. Isfahan is one of Iran's nuclear facilities. Then they assassinated this guy, Fouad Shukr. He was one of the high-ranking guys in Hezbollah, right? They killed him. This is Israel. They killed him on July 30th, 2024. Again, they attacked the embassy. Iran attacks them back. Israel attacks them back. And then Israel attacks them again and kills a high-ranking guy in Hezbollah named Fouad Shukr. Then, a day later, they kill Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. This was the guy. This was the head of the Hamas political wing. This dude was the guy that was responsible for the negotiations. They killed him with a precise bomb in his hotel room, okay? And just so you guys know, they killed him and his guy. Very accurate. They snuck bombs there roughly 2 to 3 months before. This was a huge embarrassment and slap in the face to the Iranian government because Ismail Haniyeh was there on an official visit to see the induction of the new president of Iran. So him dying on Iranian soil was incredibly embarrassing to the Iranian government. Then, fast forward to September of last year, that was the pager attack. As you guys know, on September 18th and September 17th, thousands of handheld pagers and hundreds of walkie-talkies intended for use by Hezbollah exploded simultaneously in 2 different events across Lebanon and Syria in an Israeli attack nicknamed Operation Grim Beeper. That's a funny name, I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, look.
But according to unnamed Hezbollah officials, the attack took 1,500 Hezbollah figures out of action due to injuries. So people were killed and a lot of them got maimed. And what had happened and why this operation is so crazy, guys, is because they put the bombs and explosives in these pagers and walkie-talkies 10 years prior. Okay?
You can't beat that.
So this was a very sophisticated, well thought out, organized, and detailed operation. Very impressive by the Mossad. You guys know I give them credit all the time when they pull off shit like this. This led to the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. So they weakened Hezbollah with the explosions and the beepers, and then Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, got bombed. And how they killed him was he was in Beirut. Beirut is like the stronghold here in Lebanon. They bombed a bunch of buildings, and he was killed. Okay, another big blow. So they killed 2 top officials, Fouad Shukr and Hassan Nasrallah, through airstrikes and assassinations, and they conducted the pager attack. These 2 assassinations and the pager attack led to the October 20 Iranian strikes on Israel. So Iran retaliated because Hassan Nasrallah was a very big figure for them, very important figure. So on October 1st, 2024, Iran launched about 200 ballistic missiles at targets in Israel in at least 2 waves. Then the largest attack during an ongoing Iran-Israel conflict. So after Hassan Nasrallah's death, that's how Iran responded. Then, fast forward to October 16th, the Israelis accidentally killed Yahya Sinwar. He was on the front line fighting with a bunch of Hamas fighters. He was the one that threw the stick when the drone came at him. And he's also the one that planned and coordinated the October 7th attacks after the failure of the marches in 2018 and 2019. Then, on October 26, 2024, Israel launched 3 waves of strikes against 20 locations in Iran and other locations in Iraq and Syria, codenamed Operation Days of Repentance. It was the largest attack on Iran since the Iran-Iraq War. Israel said the strikes were launched in response to the Iranian strikes against Israel earlier that month. Because you guys know on October 1st, Iran attacked Israel for killing Hassan Nasrallah in September. This led to a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Now, just so you guys know, the Israelis had invaded southern Lebanon, they had done the pager attack, and they were bombing Beirut. So 3 different things were going on at the same time. But the IDF was getting their asses kicked on the ground. They could not move and advance further into southern Lebanon. They were trying to get all the way to Beirut. They were trying to get to the Litani River. They couldn't do so. This led to a ceasefire. And this ceasefire was brokered on November 27, 2024. Now, this is important because after the ceasefire happened, Hezbollah was significantly weakened, which made what? Syria open for attack. This led to the fall of the Assad regime. On December 8, 2024, the Assad regime collapsed during a major offensive by opposition forces. The offensive was spearheaded by HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and supported mainly by the Turkish-backed Syrian National Army, as well as the ongoing Syrian civil war that began with the Syrian Revolution in 2011. Now, Bashar al-Assad, who was running Syria at the time, Hezbollah couldn't back him up, and the Russians were fighting the Ukrainians. Bashar al-Assad was able to stay in power because Putin and the Russians gave him air support. This is how he's been able to keep these rebels from attacking him for, the better part of a decade plus, because there was a civil war going on in Syria since like 2011 with the Arab Spring. So when the rebels started making their way down towards Damascus, right? So the war started here. Where is it? Idlib, right? So Idlib is the stronghold of HTS, right? These guys right here, okay? Idlib is like their fucking main area. So after the ceasefire and Hezbollah being weakened and not being able to assist the Assad regime, your guy Ahmed al-Shar went from Idlib to Aleppo, okay? And they took over Aleppo. After they took over Aleppo, they took the M5 highway down all the way to Damascus, okay? They took over Hama, Homs, and then worked their way down here. Bam, took over Damascus, the capital, right? And Bashar al-Assad knew this was coming. So what did he do? He fled to Russia.
Yeah.
When he fled to Russia, this guy took power. Ahmed al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda member. While they were doing this transition period, the Israelis intelligently went and attacked all of Syria's military infrastructure, effectively weakening the Syrian regime that was coming in. Though the Israelis and the Turks helped al-Shar get in power, they also didn't want him to ever weaponize against them, so Israel bombed all of Syria's military infrastructure during this chaos period. And now Ahmed al-Shar is president of Syria, and he kicked out all the IRGC guys from Syria. Why is this important? Because him kicking out the IRGC guys basically doesn't allow Iran to use Syria as a proxy anymore. And since Syria can't be used as a proxy anymore, they've effectively been cut off from Lebanon. As you guys can see, Syria borders Lebanon and is a critical country in the chain to get weapons and support to Hezbollah, the biggest fighting force within the axis of resistance. So you got the weakening of Hamas, right, by killing their leaders. Then you got the weakening of Lebanon and Hezbollah by killing their leaders and the pager attack. Then you get the former leader of Syria to run over to Russia for asylum. And then you put in a former terrorist. He takes over. He kicks the IRGC guys out. What's left, chat? Well, I'll tell you what's left. Iran's left. So after Ahmed al-Shar takes power, he struck a deal with Trump and got the sanctions lifted. This led to what we saw back in June, the Iran-Israel war. After Israel weakened Hamas, weakened Hezbollah, got Bashar al-Assad out of there and put in a dummy president, that left Iran weak and vulnerable. So what happened was they went and attacked with Operation Rising Lines. The point of Operation Rising Lines was to kill their nuclear scientists, to kill their high-ranking IRGC guys, and put the country in disarray. And what they hoped was that the Iranian government, the Iranian rebel groups like the Balochs, etc., would come in and overthrow the Ayatollah. Well, that was... Instead of turning on their government, what ended up happening was the government, the people rallied on the streets, and it created the effect of rallying around the flag. Everyone got together and protested and said, you need to fucking hit Israel back. Now, the reason why Iran had never been really attacking Israel that hard is because within the Iranian government, there are two different sides. One side, the reformists, and the other side, the conservatives. The reformists want diplomacy with the West to get the sanctions lifted. Iran has had crippling sanctions for a very long time, chat. But the conservatives said, no, we can't trust the West. They want to destroy us because Israel runs their foreign policy. So when Israel ran Operation Rising Lions and bombed them and attacked them, equivalent to their Pearl Harbor, the government finally united and said, no, we got to hit these guys back. Not only did the government unite between the reformists and the conservatives, the people took to the streets and protested, saying that they demand that the Iranians hit Israel back. And then what we saw happen after that was pretty much this. Boom, boom, boom.
I fucking love it when he does that.
So they hit them back, right? And they ended up getting a ceasefire. Now, I want to make this explicitly clear. Every single military expert agrees with me on this. Had this war lasted longer than 12 days, the Israelis would have gotten fucked up. Why? Because the Israelis are spending $100 million plus a day to defend themselves from Iran's missiles with the Iron Dome, the Sling, and the THAAD. But the problem here is that it costs them significantly more money to defend themselves than it takes for Iran to attack them. So in a war of attrition like this, where your warfare is pretty much just missiles hitting each other, missiles hitting different cities, right? Because the Israelis were using their air force and dropping bombs. The Iranians were using missiles and shooting them from Iran towards Israel. That is not a conflict structure that is beneficial to Israel. They don't have enough interceptor missiles to take on all Iran's missiles. So if the war continued on, they would have gone fucked up. So Trump bombed Fordo and put an end to the conflict, and they got a ceasefire. Now, I want to be clear about this. They're absolutely going to fight each other again. And this comes back to what I told you guys before. Now, as you guys can see here, the news is coming out saying that Iran has a stockpile of uranium. I promise you guys that that's going to be used as a justification when Israel attacks Iran again. And another reason, too, why we know that they're going to...
Hold on. And when Israel inevitably starts another fucking war, we'll go end it again.
Yeah, I mean, by bombing their stockpile, though, that's gonna probably make it more worse.
See, here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
I was all for the bombing of Fordo because that was it was not only a threat to Israel, it was also a threat to America. I am not okay with constantly fucking Israel writing checks that their ass can't cash. Like he's saying that, and he's right, right. So Israel would have lost. I mean, Israel was fucking Iran up, but all it took was Iran to send all their cheap missiles, bombard their system, and then send a couple hypersonics and fucking level the city. So I don't feel sorry for them if they're going to continuously go start shit. You know.
Yeah. With Iran of all guys, though, it's like Iran. Are you sure?
But we will defend them. Like that's just
we'll back
the
them
way
up,
America
too.
does it.
We'll try to back. I don't know how far we'll back them up, but I think the furthest we'll go is like, I mean, wherever they're keeping their new stockpile, I guess we'll go bomb there. But if we don't know where it's at, and these guys pop up with a nuke out of nowhere, we can't do shit to them.
I mean, if it really,
let's pray to God that I was right, and they don't have a way of delivering it like efficiently.
I mean, yeah, they can't. Iran cannot project power, so we're kind of America is safe in that regard. But it's one of those things you don't ever want them to get to the point where the next step is to just create a missile, because creating the missile is the easy part. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. On one hand, I believe Iran is a strategic threat against the United States, which is why I believe we are allied with Israel, not because, all of the what all the fucking people say about, oh, it's a holy war and all this. No, it's a war. It's attrition of convenience, right? So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Israel is the enemy of Iran. Um, and here's the thing: Israel has turned on us before. Like, Israel isn't some poor little sheepdog that they keep, or sorry, poor little sheep that they keep portraying themselves as. They are a very competent military force that knows what they're doing and engages in psychological warfare, engages in spying, engages in subterfuge, and is always kicking shit up, and we're always cleaning it up.
Yeah, and here's a problem, man. They're taking craps on like people that it's not an easy win. We just can't really project our strength as well as on Iran as well as we can on, well, I'll say like Lebanon or Syria.
Oh no, we can. We absolutely can. We showed that in June. We absolutely can just project our strength. If we wanted to, we could go over with the same pilots and fly 36 more hours and take out all of their launch sites. We could destroy a country in 36 hours and be back in time for the $5 meal deal at Taco Bell. Like,
I don't know about Iran.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We absolutely can.
We can just take Iran out overnight.
Yes. Well, we can economically, militarily, and infrastructure-wise destroy them overnight. It's not something we would be looked at as the bullies if we did that. We would be looked at in the same light Israel's being looked at. But we can absolutely do it, which is why I see, like the U.S. doesn't want to support Israel. You can tell it doesn't want to support Israel by the fact that all they went and did is blow up Fordo, right? Because they're only looking for things so that they can show that they're helping Israel, right? But not getting into it. It's like that was actually a threat against us as well as was Israel. So yeah, we'll go take that out. And a ceasefire is good for us as well as it's good for Israel. So we'll broker that. But notice how America didn't just jump right to it and start blowing shit up. Israel is our ally.
Yeah, this is our ally at the end of the day. It's just,
but we didn't jump in the war with them and say, "Oh, let's go attack targets with you, Israel."
But it does seem like Israel's conflicts do be turning into our conflicts eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does. It did in 2003 when we went into Iraq. That was a lot of Israel's influence is why we went into Iraq. Oh, they have weapons of mass destruction. Mossad said so. No, they didn't. And if you go back to 92 with the paper called The Break from Oslo, and they're defining several different wars in different countries on behalf of Israel. We're just going down the list right with them.
Man.
And it's because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's really what's going on. We don't know what side to take over there, so we take the side of, oh well, they're Jewish and they were persecuted in the late 40s or the early 30s and late 40s. So let's let's defend them because they have a righteous cause. And I think the time of that happening over and over again is dwindling down.
All right, man. We're gonna go ahead and end it on that note right there. Like you said, you gotta head out. But all right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and end it on this note. Make sure you guys double tap the screen and make sure to subscribe if you ain't subscribed already. We do try to do this every day. And all right, man, it's a set with Set Media. And shout out to my man Monty for pulling up.
What
all right, guys. All right, guys, we'll catch you tomorrow. Guys, today modern AI is quite advanced, except two problems. It is censored and it takes your information. Well, it's hard to find a tech company that don't. But let me introduce you to one. Shout out to my sponsor, Venice AI, which allows you to protect your information and avoid censorship. Now ask yourself, why should a team of programmers at these leading AI apps be the ones to decide what is okay for you to ask and think? Also, would you be comfortable if the presidential administration could govern what AI tells you? Man, I know I wouldn't. But also, while you think about that, did you know that? Let me tell you this, it's gonna be crazy, but ChatGPT has a former director of the NSA sitting on their board right now, guys. And shout out to that man, Edward Snowden. He called this a willful, calculated betrayal of the rights of every person on Earth. And we all know how Alexa is. Alexa listens to us and recommends products based on our conversations. I mean, talk about a violation of privacy. But guys, these are just a few reasons I decided to team up with Venice AI and get you a better options or solutions to your AI needs. Now, guys, you can go ahead and check these guys out with my promo code. So shout out to Venice AI. Now, if you want to use AI without fear of handing over your most intimate thoughts to a corporation or government, you can get 20% off a pro plan using my link, Venice AI SET, and use the code SET. Man, so shout out, guys. So make sure you guys use the code. Put up one more time for you guys right there. Once again, guys want to go ahead and have unleashed AI, uncensored AI. Go ahead and tap in with my guys at Venice AI, guys. Hey, this is SET and appreciate the support. And shout out to the sponsor.